Intoxicated visitor shoves marching royal guard. Moments later, he's mercilessly trampled. Emotional. John Carter had been planning his trip to London for months. The city had always fascinated him with its history, its culture, and most of all, its iconic landmarks. But of all the places he wanted to see, Buckingham Palace had always held a special place in his imagination. Ever since he was a child, he had pictured the grandeur of the palace, the shining guards in their red coats and tall bearskin hats, marching with precise steps that never faltered. Today, he was finally going to see it in person. The morning air was crisp and filled with the chatter of tourists from all over the world. John, feeling excited and a little restless, navigated through the crowd with his camera slung around his neck. His friends had already gone to explore other parts of the city, leaving him to enjoy this moment alone. He could hear the distant sound of drums and bugles, signaling that the changing of the guard was about to begin. For John, this was a moment of pure anticipation. He had spent the last night celebrating with some local friends he had met in a pub near the river. A few pints of beer had loosened him up, and while he felt a little hungover now, the excitement of the day seemed to overpower any discomfort. As he walked closer to the palace, he noticed the crowd growing thicker, people jostling to get a better view. John felt a rush of adrenaline. He had always loved being part of exciting moments, and seeing the guards in action was definitely one of them. As he moved closer to the barriers that kept the crowd at a safe distance from the guards, he noticed how serious and disciplined the soldiers looked. Their faces were calm, almost stern, their eyes forward, and their steps perfectly timed with the drum beats. To John, they looked like statues, or maybe characters from a storybook come to life. He raised his camera, snapping pictures rapidly, trying to capture every detail. The glint of their polished boots, the stiff black bearskin hats, the bright red jackets that seemed almost unreal in the sunlight. The crowd around him was buzzing with excitement. People were pointing, whispering, and taking photos. John felt a surge of energy. Being here, in this historic moment, surrounded by people from all over the world, was exhilarating. He didn't want to just watch, he wanted to be part of it. In his mind, he imagined himself standing closer to the guards, maybe even nudging the barriers a little to get a better view. He knew it wasn't allowed, but he thought it would be harmless, just a small push to see things more clearly. John edged closer, trying not to be noticed by the security officers. He could feel the heat of the crowd pressing against him, the smell of damp coats and warm breath mixing with the scent of the city. It was a strange combination of chaos and order, the crowd moving and pushing, while the guards remained perfectly still, almost floating above the commotion. He felt a thrill of mischief, the kind that often came after a night of drinking, when logic seemed less important than excitement. He noticed a group of tourists ahead of him laughing and leaning over the barriers. One of them accidentally brushed against a guard's boot. The soldier didn't react, but John felt a strange fascination. He had never been in such close proximity to someone who was so disciplined, so controlled, and yet so human. It made him want to test the limits just a little. Just one small nudge, he thought, just enough to feel the reaction. No harm would come from it, right? With that thought, John leaned forward slightly, brushing against the barrier and then, almost impulsively, giving it a gentle shove. He laughed, a little louder than he intended, and looked around to see if anyone had noticed. The people nearby were too focused on the spectacle of the guards to pay attention to him. For a moment, John felt invincible, as if he were part of the performance rather than just a spectator. He didn't notice the subtle tension building among the guards, the slight shifts in their formation that were carefully hidden from the crowd. John took another step closer. The drums grew louder, the music more rhythmic, as the guards marched in precise unison. He could hear the echo of their boots against the stone pavement, each step perfectly timed with the others. The sound was mesmerizing, and John found himself moving closer and closer, wanting to feel the rhythm, to be part of the precision. The crowd around him was still excited, but he felt a separation, a sense that he was alone with the guards in this moment. The sun was high now, casting a warm glow over the palace grounds. John's excitement made him forget everything else. The people around him, the rules, even the slight ache from the night before. He was completely absorbed in the moment, feeling the power of history and tradition all around him. He raised his camera again, trying to capture the perfect shot of the guards in formation. But something inside him wanted more than a photo. He wanted to touch the moment, to feel it physically. In that impulsive mood, John took a step too close. He leaned over the barrier just enough to reach out and give one of the marching guards a gentle push. It was meant to be playful, a small gesture, but in that instant the perfect precision of the formation was disrupted. The guard remained composed for a brief second, but the movement sent a ripple through the line. John didn't notice immediately. He was too caught up in the thrill, laughing and turning to show the people behind him what he had done. Around him, the crowd continued to cheer and take photos, unaware of the tiny shift that had just occurred. John's heart raced. He felt a mix of fear and exhilaration, the kind of feeling that comes when someone does something just outside the rules and gets away with it. He took another step closer, thinking that maybe the guard hadn't noticed. Maybe it was fine. Maybe it was just part of the excitement of being there. The guards, trained for years to maintain composure under any circumstances, started adjusting their steps. The formation was still mostly intact, but the subtle disruption was enough to create a tension that John could not see. He was completely absorbed in the moment, his eyes wide with excitement, his camera clicking constantly. He felt alive in a way he hadn't in years, completely disconnected from the consequences that might follow. John glanced around again, noticing the other tourists, the flashing cameras, the smiles and laughter. He felt a strange sense of freedom, the kind that comes from being a part of something historic, yet feeling untouchable. He imagined the story he would tell when he returned home, how he had seen the guards up close, how he had been part of a moment of tradition, how he had felt the thrill of proximity to something so disciplined and grand. As the guards continued their march, John took one last step forward, leaning just a bit too far. His laughter echoed, mixing with the drumbeats and cheers. For John, the world seemed perfect in that moment, a mixture of color, sound, and movement that he would remember forever. He didn't realize that in that instant, a chain reaction had begun, one that would turn a moment of playful excitement into something much more serious. The music of the drums grew louder, echoing across the palace courtyard. John Carter, still caught in the excitement of being so close to the famous guards, didn't notice how the subtle movement he had caused was affecting the formation. The guards were trained to march with perfection, but even a small interruption could ripple through their carefully timed steps. John, laughing and pointing his camera at the guards, felt a surge of energy, convinced that no harm could come from such a playful gesture. He noticed one of the guards glance briefly in his direction, but the soldier's face remained composed, almost unreadable. This moment of eye contact thrilled John even more. He felt a strange mix of fear and fascination. The guard's disciplined gaze seemed to challenge him, almost as if silently saying, "Be careful." But John's excitement was overpowering his caution. He leaned a little closer, trying to capture a better angle for his photos. The crowd around him cheered and jostled as well, none of them fully aware of the tension building in the line of marching soldiers. As the formation continued, John's playful shove became a small point of disruption. The guards, though trained to absorb such minor disturbances, started making micro-adjustments. Their boots tapped a fraction of a second out of sync, the precise rhythm of their march slightly altered. Most of the tourists didn't notice. To them, the guards still looked perfect, immovable and awe-inspiring. But for John, who was leaning over the barrier, this slight change felt exhilarating. He felt powerful in a strange way, as if his small action had made a difference in this monumental event. John stepped forward again, his camera held high, capturing every detail. The shine of the guards' buttons, the crispness of their red coats, the synchronized swing of their rifles. He laughed to himself, thinking about how incredible it was to be part of this moment, even if only as a spectator. His mind raced with stories he would tell later, imagining the pride and envy of friends back home. He felt untouchable, wrapped up in the rhythm of the ceremony, unaware of the consequences slowly building around him. The guards continued their march, a wave of red coats and polished boots moving with disciplined precision. Each step they took was meant to be predictable, flawless, but John's repeated closeness had created a disturbance. One of the soldiers, sensing a slight imbalance, adjusted his step. Another followed instinctively, trying to maintain alignment. The ripple moved through the formation, subtle but real. To most people in the crowd, it looked like nothing had changed. To those trained in the discipline of ceremonial marching, it was a serious challenge. John, oblivious to the risk, decided to lean even further. He had noticed other tourists snapping selfies and thought he could do the same, maybe even get a dramatic shot of the guards right next to him. He raised his camera, squinting through the viewfinder, trying to frame the perfect photo. His heart beat faster, a mix of excitement and adrenaline. The crowd around him pushed slightly as people shifted to get a better view, adding to the pressure of the moment. John didn't notice how close he was to the edge of safety. One of the guards, noticing John leaning dangerously close to the barrier, gave a subtle but firm shift in his step to maintain distance. The movement was almost imperceptible, but in a tightly coordinated formation, even the smallest adjustment could affect others. The ripple of change passed from one soldier to the next. John laughed, thinking it was just a trick of perspective, unaware that the rhythm of the march had been broken. He took another step forward, thinking he could lean just a little closer without causing any real problem. The drum beats echoed louder, each strike filling the air with tension. The guards moved forward in their line, but the perfect symmetry of their steps had been disrupted. For John, this added to the thrill. He felt like he was on the edge of something exciting, standing so close to these disciplined soldiers. He didn't hear the murmurs of caution from nearby onlookers or the subtle movements of security officers watching him carefully. His focus was entirely on the spectacle and on capturing it from the best possible angle. As the formation reached a narrow part of the courtyard, the small disruption John had caused became more critical. The soldiers were marching in tight lines, with little room for error. Each guard depended on the step of the one in front of him to maintain the perfect rhythm. John's leaning, his playful nudges against the barrier, and the subtle push he had given earlier created an unexpected ripple effect. The guards adjusted minutely, but even tiny changes in timing could lead to bigger problems in the next few steps. John's excitement grew with each passing second. He laughed at the thrill, clicking his camera rapidly, imagining how incredible the photos would look. He felt like he was part of history, standing at the center of an iconic event. For him, the world had narrowed down to the red uniforms, the black bearskin hats, and the rhythmic sound of boots on stone. The cheers of the crowd and the beat of the drums were a soundtrack to the moment, and he felt alive in a way he hadn't in a long time. Suddenly, one of the guards shifted his rifle slightly to maintain alignment. Another followed instinctively, creating a small chain reaction. John didn't notice immediately, caught up in his own excitement. He raised his camera higher, trying to capture the perfect angle of the march. The guards' polished boots clicked against the stone, their movements synchronized in a way that still seemed perfect from a distance. But the underlying tension had increased, invisible to everyone but the trained eyes of the soldiers. John decided to move a little closer to the center of the crowd. He wanted the ultimate shot, the one that would show the guards marching as if they were walking through a storybook. He squeezed between other tourists, laughing and trying to make space for himself. The crowd's movement pressed him forward, and he didn't notice how much closer he was getting to the edge of the barrier. Every step he took seemed harmless to him, yet with each movement, the situation grew more fragile. The guards continued to march, maintaining their focus and discipline. They were trained to perform flawlessly, no matter the distractions. But John's repeated movements, leaning, laughing, and nudging, created a subtle disturbance that threatened their precision. Each guard adjusted, minute by minute, trying to maintain balance and rhythm. The tension in the formation increased, even if it wasn't obvious to the audience. John's attention was completely absorbed by the spectacle. He didn't hear the whispers of warning from those around him, didn't see the slight glances from security officers. His heart pounded with excitement. He felt a mix of nervousness and exhilaration, the kind that comes when someone does something just outside the rules. He thought just for a moment that he could push the limits a little further without consequence. The sunlight reflected off the guards' polished buttons, casting tiny flashes of brilliance across the courtyard. John raised his camera again, leaning just a little too far over the barrier. The crowd around him was still cheering, still moving, still unaware of the tension growing just a few feet away. John's mind was filled with images of the perfect photo, the perfect moment frozen forever. He didn't realize that in a matter of seconds, this playful excitement could turn into something far more serious. The ripple from his earlier push was now fully spreading through the formation. The guards adjusted instinctively, maintaining their composure, but the perfect rhythm had been interrupted. Each bootstep was slightly off, each swing of the rifle slightly misaligned. John, still leaning forward, clicking his camera, felt completely in control of the situation, unaware that the disciplined line of soldiers was delicately balancing on the edge of disruption. For John, it was a moment of pure thrill. He felt connected to the history, to the pageantry, to the tradition he had admired from afar for so many years. He imagined telling the story to friends and family, showing the photos and describing how close he had been to the guards. Every sense was heightened. The drum beats, the sunlight, the polished boots, the disciplined movements. He felt alive, invincible, completely absorbed in the magic of the moment. And yet, beneath all this excitement, the first small cracks in the illusion of perfection were beginning to show. The guards were making tiny adjustments, the rhythm subtly off, and the perfect choreography of the march was no longer entirely flawless. John, unaware of the fragility he had caused, laughed and moved slightly again, caught up in the joy of being part of something so remarkable. The moment was intoxicating, and he didn't see the danger forming just steps away. The drumbeats filled the courtyard with a deep, steady rhythm that seemed to echo from the walls of Buckingham Palace itself. John Carter's heart raced with excitement, his fingers tightening on the camera as he leaned forward to get the perfect shot. Every step of the guard seemed mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, and John felt drawn into the precision of their movement. He was so focused on capturing the moment that he didn't notice the subtle shift in the rhythm of the march, the ripple that had started from his own playful push. The guards marched in perfect unison, or at least, they tried to. For them, every step was a practice in discipline, every movement a result of years of training. But even the smallest disruption could have consequences. John had already leaned too far forward, his hands brushing against the barrier in his eagerness. The next time he shifted slightly, the movement nudged the barrier in a way that reached the nearest guard. The soldier, maintaining composure, adjusted his step, trying to absorb the tiny disturbance. But in a tightly choreographed line, one small misstep can grow, like a wave moving through a still pond. John didn't notice the subtle adjustments. He was laughing, pointing his camera and stepping forward again, imagining the perfect photograph he would share with everyone back home. The crowd around him continued to cheer and push, caught up in their own excitement. The sound of cameras clicking, people whispering, and the guards' boots striking the stone all blended together in a chaotic symphony. To John, the energy of the moment was intoxicating, and he felt completely alive, as if nothing in the world could go wrong here. But the ripple of disturbance in the formation was growing. Each guard instinctively adjusted his step, shifting his weight slightly to maintain balance. One soldier swayed a fraction too much, another moved a fraction too little. These tiny changes were imperceptible to the audience, but they were real. The line of soldiers was beginning to lose the flawless precision that made the ceremony so impressive. To the trained eye, the rhythm was faltering. John, however, remained unaware. His attention was entirely absorbed by the guards and the perfect shot he hoped to capture. Feeling braver, John leaned even closer, trying to frame a dramatic photo of the soldiers, boots, and the polished rifles reflecting the sunlight. He laughed and nudged the barrier again, thinking it was harmless. But in that moment, the perfect balance of the marching line reached a critical point. The guard nearest to him stumbled slightly, not enough to fall, but enough to disrupt the rhythm of the soldiers behind him. The ripple spread, and John still didn't notice. He was lost in his excitement, completely unaware of how fragile the situation had become. The guards, trained for years to maintain composure even under distraction, continued marching with remarkable discipline. Their faces remained calm, their eyes forward, their posture perfect. But every step required more concentration than before. The subtle disturbance John had created was now being felt by every soldier in the formation. The beat of the drums seemed louder, almost urgent, as if the ceremony itself was warning of the approaching imbalance. The audience, meanwhile, cheered and clicked photos, oblivious to the danger growing just a few feet away. John moved slightly to the side to get a better angle, squeezing between other tourists. He raised his camera, thinking this would be the shot that captured the majesty of the guards. At that moment, his foot caught on a small stone, causing him to wobble slightly. He laughed nervously, steadying himself, unaware that this small movement, combined with his earlier nudges, was enough to create a chain reaction. The guard nearest to him adjusted his step again, and the ripple moved down the line. The crowd, sensing excitement, pressed forward. People jostled for position, leaning over barriers, lifting children onto shoulders. The energy of the crowd added pressure to the already delicate balance of the ceremony. John, caught in his own excitement, felt invincible. He could see the guards perfectly framed in his camera lens, and he imagined showing these photos to everyone he knew. For a few seconds, he forgot to notice the tension building in the line of soldiers. Suddenly, the unexpected happened. One guard's boot struck the stone slightly off rhythm, a minor misstep that would normally go unnoticed. But because of the ripple John had caused, the effect passed through the line. Each soldier instinctively corrected, but the corrections were not perfectly timed. The rhythm faltered, just a little, just enough to create instability in the marching line. John, still leaning forward, laughing and pointing his camera, didn't see it coming. A few spectators gasped as they noticed the subtle stumble. Some looked at John with concern, wondering if he realized how close he was to the edge. But John was too focused, too lost in the moment to notice the silent warnings around him. He leaned further, trying to get a close-up of the guard's polished boots striking the stone. The combination of his excitement, the crowd's movement, and the slight imbalance in the formation was now creating a very real risk. The guards, trained to maintain order, reacted instinctively. They adjusted their steps, but each adjustment affected the soldiers behind them. The ripple grew, and the precision of the march became increasingly fragile. John, however, was completely absorbed in the photos. He clicked rapidly, laughing at the beauty of the scene, not realizing how close he had come to causing a serious accident. As the formation moved into a more confined area of the courtyard, the space for adjustment became smaller. The guard's boots struck the stone with slightly uneven timing. A brief glance between officers showed awareness of the growing instability, but there was little they could do without breaking the ceremony entirely. John, meanwhile, took another step forward, leaning over the barrier and nudging it again. The small push, combined with the jostling crowd and the chain reaction through the formation, brought the situation to a critical point. John's laughter and excitement continued, his attention focused on the perfect photo. He didn't notice the subtle shifts, the tiny missteps, the slight adjustments in balance that were happening in front of him. The guards remained composed, but the tension was almost palpable. Their disciplined training kept them steady, but the rhythm that had once been flawless was now fragile, teetering on the edge of chaos. The crowd sensed that something was different. A few people whispered, "Did you see that?" or "Something off." But most were still caught up in the excitement, unaware that the delicate balance was about to break. John, seeing the guards perfectly framed in his lens, felt a surge of pride. He was capturing something historic, a moment he would never forget. For him, the world had narrowed down to the red coats, the bearskin hats, the polished boots, and the beat of the drums. Then it happened. One guard, stepping to correct the line, stumbled slightly. The soldier regained balance almost instantly, but the adjustment passed down the line. Another guard shifted his weight to compensate. The ripple moved further, subtle but real. John, leaning forward for his next shot, didn't notice the danger. He clicked the shutter repeatedly, laughing, enjoying the spectacle. The crowd's cheers added to the tension, pushing him slightly closer to the edge. Every step now carried a risk. The guards were trying to maintain perfect alignment, but the chain reaction from John's earlier nudges and the slight imbalance in the line had created instability. The drumbeats, once a steady rhythm, seemed to echo with urgency. The guard's boots struck the stone in a rhythm that was no longer perfectly synchronized. The crowd was unaware of the growing danger, caught up in the excitement of the ceremony and the beautiful spectacle before them. John moved slightly again, leaning forward, trying to capture the perfect angle of the guards' boots and rifles. The ripple effect reached the middle of the formation, where the soldiers' coordination was most critical. A minor stumble here could affect the entire line. John, completely absorbed in the photos, didn't see the subtle signs of instability developing right in front of him. He felt alive, powerful, and untouchable, unaware of how close the situation was to spinning out of control. The guards continued to march, disciplined and composed, but the perfect rhythm was gone. Every step required more effort, more focus, more instinctive adjustment. John, oblivious, continued leaning forward, clicking his camera, laughing, imagining the story he would tell. He didn't see the tension building, the careful corrections being made, or the tiny missteps that would soon lead to a moment that no one could forget. In the span of a few seconds, what had started as playful curiosity and excitement had escalated into a fragile situation. The ripple of imbalance passed from soldier to soldier, growing with each step. The crowd pressed closer, adding to the pressure. John, caught up in the thrill of being so close to the iconic guards, still didn't realize the potential danger. Every instinct of the soldiers was now focused on maintaining composure, on keeping the formation from breaking completely. The courtyard seemed to hold its breath. The drumbeats echoed, the crowd cheered, and John laughed, thinking he was part of something magical. The ripple of imbalance, however, was moving through the line of soldiers like a wave, ready to create a moment of chaos. And in that moment, John's excitement, the subtle disruptions, and the tightly coordinated steps of the guards were on a collision course with reality. The courtyard seemed to hold its breath as the guards continued to march. their boots striking the stone with a rhythm that had once been flawless but now wavered ever so slightly. John Carter, completely absorbed in the moment, didn't notice the subtle warning signals around him. He laughed and leaned forward, raising his camera, eager to capture every detail of the guards' precise movements. The crowd around him continued to cheer and click cameras, caught up in the excitement of the spectacle. For most, it was a perfect display of tradition. For John, it was a dream come true. But the reality of the situation was far more delicate. The ripple from John's earlier actions, the nudges against the barrier, the playful leaning, the accidental brush against the guards, had reached a critical point. The soldiers, trained to adjust and maintain composure, were now performing microcorrections with each step. Their eyes remained forward, faces composed, but every movement required intense focus. A tiny mistake here could create a larger reaction. Every guard depended on the one in front of him to maintain alignment. The chain was tight, unbroken but fragile. John, lost in his excitement, decided he wanted the ultimate photo, a close-up of the guards' boots striking the stone in perfect sync. He stepped slightly closer, jostling against other tourists. The barrier that had kept him at a safe distance shifted slightly under the pressure. John laughed, thinking it was harmless, but the ripple effect that had begun earlier now moved faster, reaching the center of the formation. A slight stumble by one soldier caused another to adjust, and then another. The rhythm, once near perfect, was now off by fractions of a second. The first sign of real danger came almost imperceptibly. One guard, stepping to maintain the line, stumbled slightly. He regained his balance immediately, but the shift caused the next soldier to adjust his step. The ripple passed down the line like a wave. John, leaning over the barrier and clicking his camera, didn't notice. The crowd, unaware of the delicate tension, cheered louder, pressing closer to see the spectacle. The energy of excitement added to the pressure. A second stumble followed almost immediately. The guards' instincts took over, and they moved with controlled precision to prevent the line from breaking. But the combined effect of the stumbles, the crowd's push, and John's leaning was now significant. The soldiers' boots struck the ground slightly out of sync. To the trained eye, this was a serious disruption. For John, it was still a perfect scene, a moment of magic he wanted to capture on camera. The sound of the drums seemed to intensify, almost as if marking the tension in the air. The guards were still moving in formation, their faces calm and eyes forward, but the rhythm had been broken. Each step now required conscious effort, and each adjustment affected the soldiers behind. The line was no longer a perfect flow but a delicate balance, like a tightrope stretched across the courtyard. John, still laughing and raising his camera, was dangerously close to becoming part of the problem. Suddenly, one guard's foot caught slightly on a stone, a minor misstep amplified by the ripple effect. The soldier stumbled but regained balance, his body instinctively correcting to maintain formation. Another guard, following in step, adjusted sharply. The wave of tiny corrections moved down the line with increasing speed. John, still leaning forward, didn't notice the subtle danger moving toward him. The crowd around him pressed closer, jostling him slightly, and he stumbled just a little as he tried to regain his footing. The next moments happened almost in slow motion. The ripple of missteps had now reached the middle of the formation. The guard's boots struck the stone with uneven timing. A minor collision between rifles occurred as one soldier tried to compensate for the misstep in front of him. The chain of precise movement that had made the ceremony so impressive was now unstable. John, leaning further to capture the perfect photo, had unknowingly positioned himself directly in the path of the disrupted line. The crowd gasped as they sensed the tension in the formation. Some began to step back, sensing that something might go wrong. Others, caught up in the excitement, didn't notice. John, completely absorbed in his own thrill, was unaware of the warnings around him. He laughed at the scene, adjusting his camera, trying to capture the motion of the boots, imagining the perfect photo that would tell the story of being close to history. Then it happened. The first clear stumble of the line reached John's immediate area. A guard near the center of the formation stumbled slightly to maintain balance, and the ripple moved toward the edge where John was standing. The soldiers were reacting instinctively, their bodies moving to keep the line intact, but the momentum was now directed outward toward him. John's foot slipped slightly on the edge of the barrier. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. He realized too late that he was too close, and the disciplined wave of movement from the guards was moving toward him. Panic surged through him. He tried to step back, but the crowd pressed in, making it hard to move quickly. The guards' disciplined steps, designed to be precise and controlled, now carried force. The combination of momentum, missteps, and crowd movement created a dangerous situation. John's heart pounded in his chest. He had never felt fear like this before, the kind that comes suddenly, sharply, and without warning. The guards, still maintaining composure, moved with instinctive discipline, but the line was no longer just ceremonial. Each step carried a real weight, a real impact. The ripple of disruption, starting from a playful push, had grown into a wave of controlled but unstoppable momentum. John, realizing the danger, tried to steady himself, gripping the barrier tightly. The polished boots of the soldiers struck the stone closer and closer to him. The crowd gasped, some moving back, some frozen in shock. For John, the thrill of excitement was replaced by sharp fear. He had been caught in a moment of reckless curiosity and playful mischief, and now the reality of the situation hit him like a wave. The carefully choreographed performance of the guards, once a symbol of perfection, had become a force he could not avoid. Each soldier's step was deliberate, precise, yet unstoppable. The momentum carried outward, toward the edge where John had been leaning, and he had nowhere to go fast enough. The crowd screamed as the wave of disciplined steps swept past. John stumbled backward, trying to regain his footing, but the combination of jostling tourists and the guards' movement made it impossible. He fell against the barrier, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The polished boots of the soldiers moved like a tide, unstoppable, as the ripple passed. John felt the force against him, the shock of realizing how quickly a playful moment could turn into something frightening. Spectators watched in disbelief. Some rushed forward to pull John back, while others froze, unsure how to react. The guards, unaware of individual spectators in the heat of the moment, continued their disciplined steps, their training keeping them moving in line, even as the ripple of missteps passed through. The sound of boots striking the stone, the drumbeats, the gasps of the crowd, all blended into a moment of controlled chaos. John struggled to regain balance, gripping the barrier with every ounce of strength he could muster. In a few moments that felt like an eternity, the wave of momentum passed. John stumbled back, shaken, his heart racing. He realized how quickly a moment of excitement and playful curiosity had turned into danger. The guards continued their march, faces calm, eyes forward, as if nothing had happened, their discipline intact. The crowd slowly absorbed what had just occurred, murmuring in disbelief and concern. John stood trembling, holding his camera, looking at the polished boots and the disciplined soldiers, understanding fully for the first time the power of the moment he had been part of. The adrenaline coursing through him slowly faded, replaced by a sobering awareness. He had been reckless, caught up in excitement and curiosity, and he had come dangerously close to serious harm. The lesson was sharp, unforgettable, and humbling. The guards, their discipline intact, continued the ceremony, their poise and precision a stark contrast to the chaos that had nearly unfolded. The crowd, now quieter, began to step back, giving space and respect to the scene before them. For John, the incident was a turning point. The excitement he had felt, the thrill of being close to history, was now tempered with a deep respect for the discipline, tradition, and danger inherent in such precise performances. He lowered his camera, his hands shaking slightly, and stepped back from the barrier, finally observing the guards not as objects of entertainment, but as professionals carrying out a centuries-old tradition with skill and commitment. The moments after the incident seemed almost unreal. John Carter stood back from the barrier, his hands still shaking, his camera hanging loosely around his neck. The excitement and thrill he had felt earlier had completely vanished, replaced by a heavy awareness of what had just happened. The cheering crowd had fallen into a hush, and whispers spread like ripples across the spectators. Some people were pointing, others shaking their heads, and a few were gently shaking John to see if he was all right. He felt a mix of relief and embarrassment, unsure exactly how to react. The guards, ever disciplined, continued their march with faces calm and eyes forward. To the crowd, they seemed unshaken, as if nothing had happened. But the officers leading the formation knew the danger that had passed only moments ago. Every step they had taken, every adjustment, had been critical to maintaining the safety of both themselves and the audience. They were trained for years to remain composed under pressure, but the ripple caused by one excited tourist had almost led to disaster. For John, witnessing their professionalism in the aftermath was humbling. Emergency personnel who had been stationed nearby as part of standard protocol quickly moved to the area. They checked John for any signs of injury, even though by luck he had escaped serious harm. He felt a rush of gratitude toward them, realizing how easily things could have gone differently. The adrenaline that had surged through him earlier began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of reflection. He thought about how quickly a moment of carelessness and curiosity could escalate into a dangerous situation. John could hear people around him discussing the incident in hushed tones. Some expressed shock at what had nearly occurred, others gave advice to be more careful. For a few moments, he felt the weight of responsibility, the realization that his playful actions had been part of what caused the disruption in the guards' formation. The thought made him uneasy. He hadn't intended harm. He hadn't even thought of the consequences. And yet the reality was clear. His excitement had nearly put him in serious danger. As the ceremony resumed, slowly returning to its orderly rhythm, John observed the guards with renewed respect. Their faces remained composed, their posture perfect, their movements precise. He understood for the first time that the seemingly effortless display of discipline was the result of years of training, focus, and dedication. The danger of one small ripple, one slight misstep, had reminded him of the value of their skill. Every step the guards took was deliberate, and the balance they maintained in the midst of distractions was remarkable. John stepped back further from the barrier, taking a deep breath to calm himself. The courtyard, once vibrant with cheering, now carried a different energy, a mix of awe, respect, and contemplation. Tourists who had been caught up in the excitement began to lower their cameras and observe quietly. The incident had reminded everyone that even ceremonial events, beautiful and historic as they were, required caution and awareness. John's heart still raced from the shock, but he felt a growing sense of appreciation for the discipline that had prevented something far worse. As he reflected, John realized how much the experience had changed his perspective. Earlier, he had been focused on capturing the perfect photo, on being part of the spectacle, and on his own excitement. Now, he understood that respect and awareness were as important as enthusiasm. The incident was a reminder that even moments of joy and curiosity must be balanced with caution and consideration for those around him. John felt a quiet shame for his recklessness, but also gratitude for the lesson he had learned. Nearby, spectators continued to murmur, sharing their versions of the story. Some praised the guards' composure, marveling at their ability to maintain order under unexpected pressure. Others speculated about what might have happened if John had leaned further or lost his balance entirely. John listened to these discussions, absorbing the reality of the situation. He realized that he had been lucky and that the professionalism of the guards had played a crucial role in preventing harm. It was a lesson in humility and in the importance of discipline. John slowly walked away from the barrier, moving to a quieter corner of the courtyard. He thought about the events of the day, the excitement of finally seeing Buckingham Palace, the thrill of being so close to the guards, and the sudden, shocking shift from joy to fear. He understood that this would be a story he would never forget, one that would stay with him for the rest of his life. It was a moment of learning, reflection, and respect, wrapped up in the memory of history and tradition. He noticed families around him discussing the incident with their children. Some were using it as a teaching moment, explaining the importance of caution and respect for rules and tradition. John watched quietly, realizing that this lesson applied to everyone, not just himself. The discipline of the guards, the reaction of the crowd, and the guidance of the personnel on site all showed the importance of mindfulness in situations where excitement and risk coexist. John felt a sense of gratitude for the wisdom of those around him. As the ceremony fully returned to order, the guards completed their march with the same composure they had shown from the beginning. John observed the symmetry and rhythm, now appreciating it with new eyes. Each movement, each boot striking the stone, each swing of a rifle, seemed even more impressive than before. The perfection of the performance was not just about tradition or spectacle, it was about control, focus, and responsibility. John realized that his near mishap had given him a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to maintain order under pressure. John's camera, once an instrument of excitement and personal achievement, now felt like a reminder of caution. He lowered it, letting his hands rest at his sides. He thought about the photos he had taken and how the story behind them was far more important than the images themselves. The thrill of the moment had been replaced by insight, and he felt a quiet pride in having learned something invaluable from the experience. He understood that enthusiasm without awareness could lead to danger, and that humility and respect were essential, even in moments of joy. He began to move toward the exit, taking one last look at the palace and the guards. The sunlight reflected off the polished boots and red coats, and John felt a mixture of relief, admiration, and contemplation. The incident had shaken him, yes, but it had also left a lasting impression. He understood the value of tradition, the discipline required to maintain it, and the importance of being mindful of one's actions, even in moments of excitement. It was a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. As John walked away, he noticed a few other tourists approaching the guards carefully, keeping a respectful distance. He felt a sense of responsibility, realizing that his experience might guide others to act with more caution. He reflected on how easily a joyful moment could turn into danger, and how the professionalism of the guards and the awareness of emergency personnel had prevented something much worse. Gratitude filled him, not just for his own safety, but for the wisdom he had gained. By the time John left Buckingham Palace, the sun had begun to dip in the sky, casting a warm glow across the city. He walked slowly, letting the events of the day sink in. He thought about his excitement, his reckless curiosity, and the sudden shock of near danger. He reflected on the professionalism and discipline of the guards, the reactions of the crowd, and the role of awareness and respect in public spaces. It was a day of learning, and the lesson was unforgettable. John returned to his hotel that evening with a quiet sense of reflection. He reviewed the photos he had taken, now seeing them not just as souvenirs but as reminders of what had happened. Each image carried a story, not just of the spectacle of the guards, but of the thin line between excitement and danger, between curiosity and recklessness. He realized that the memory of the day would stay with him forever, not for the photos he captured, but for the lessons he had learned. In the following days, John shared the story with friends and family. He described the excitement, the thrill, and the moment of near danger. But more importantly, he shared the lessons he had learned, the importance of respect, awareness, and discipline. The incident had left a lasting impression, reminding him and those who heard the story that even moments of joy must be tempered with caution. The guard's professionalism, the quick response of personnel, and his own reflection combined to create a story that was both memorable and meaningful. By the time John returned home, he felt that he had grown in ways he hadn't anticipated. The excitement of visiting Buckingham Palace had transformed into a deeper appreciation for tradition, discipline, and awareness. He realized that even a moment of playful curiosity could have serious consequences if not handled with care. And he understood more than ever the value of gratitude for his safety, for the professionalism of the guards, and for the lessons life sometimes teaches in the most unexpected ways. The story of that day stayed with John for the rest of his life. Whenever he looked back on it, he remembered the thrill, the excitement, and the near accident, but he also remembered the respect, the discipline, and the insight he had gained. It was a day that began with joy and ended with understanding, a moment that reminded him of the delicate balance between curiosity and caution, excitement and respect, joy and responsibility.